Well, good morning again. Hope everyone is doing okay or having a wonderful holiday weekend. We got to go out yesterday and take the kids shopping and all sorts of fun stuff. We have birthdays this weekend. This is Maggie Beth's birthday was Friday and Nanette's birthday is today, so we had to do some birthday shopping. So it was a lot of fun. Had a good weekend so far. Well, here we are. We are in our final week of our series called Monsters Inside, and we have been looking at different feelings, attitudes, emotions that have been inside of us that come out, and when they come out, typically they're monsters. And we've talked about envy, we've talked about anger, we've talked about pride, and today we're going to talk about a new one. Today we're going to talk about bitterness. Now, how many of you have ever harbored bitterness before? I think we all have, haven't we? We've had bitterness, or we might even have bitterness now. You know, bitterness is one of those things that we don't really think about a whole lot. It just kind of stays with us. Bitterness is one of those emotions, unlike anger, where a lot of times anger comes out of us, bitterness stays inside of us. And when bitterness stays inside of us, it becomes this monster that rages in us and builds up in us and becomes bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger and does more and more damage. Now, what is bitterness? Bitterness, quite simply, is this emotion of resentment, of distrust. It can even get to the point where it becomes anger or hatred. But a lot of times it just is this boiling, festering feeling inside of us that is just saying, you know what? I don't want to deal with them anymore. I don't want to have anything to do with them anymore. I don't trust them anymore. And all these emotions can be wrapped up into one feeling of bitterness. And you feel it when you hit it. When you run into that person or that situation or that circumstance that caused a bitterness inside of you, you know it. Because it rages up inside of you and you get that feeling. It may be a feeling you have from a family member. Maybe there's a particular family member that you're just bitter towards. You know, a brother or a sister, a mom and dad, or a child or a cousin, or, you know, you may have one of those relatives that just whenever you run into them, you think, I just don't want to have anything to do with them. You know, they did this to me, they did this, you know, they broke my trust in this area, they did something in this situation, and I just don't want to have anything to do with them anymore. I don't trust them, I don't want to be around them, and as far as I'm concerned, if I never see them again, I'm fine. Guess what? That's bitterness. It may be a coworker. There may be a coworker that you just really don't want to be around. You don't want to have anything to do with them because of what they did and what they said and the actions that they took. You just really think, you know what? I don't want to have anything to do with that person anymore. I'm done with them. Maybe a neighbor. It may be a friend. It may be a boss. It may be someone that you don't even really think about a whole lot, that maybe you don't even know them. You know, a lot of times today, people have bitterness against people they don't even know. You know, they've heard about something, they've seen about something. They have bitterness towards a group of people like a government. They have bitterness towards the church or a particular church. They have bitterness against all sorts of things. And this feeling of bitterness inside of us rages up and it becomes this monster. And what this monster does is it destroys you and me, and it destroys the people around us. Whether we realize it or not, whether we ever think about it, bitterness is a destroyer. You know, we look at anger and we say, yeah, I can see how anger does that. And I can see how pride does that. And I can see how envy. Bitterness, believe me, bitterness, when you look at Scripture, bitterness is quite plain. And Scripture is quite plain about what bitterness does to you and what it does to the people around you. Matter of fact, if you'll look with me in Hebrews chapter 12. Hebrews chapter 12, we find some good Scripture on bitterness and the monster that is bitterness and how we can defeat this monster and what we can do to knock this monster out of our life. Okay, so it's Hebrews chapter 12, verse 14 and 15, and this is what it says. It says, make every effort to live in peace with everyone and to be holy. Without holiness, no one will see the Lord. Verse 15, see to it that no one falls short of the grace of God and that no bitter root grows up and causes trouble and defiles many. Now, here in this specific circumstance, it doesn't mention the word bitterness right out, does it? What it does do is it gives us an idea of what bitterness is and what bitterness does. You see, the Bible describes bitterness as a bitter root or a root system. Now, I don't know about you guys, but have you ever dealt with one of these really big trees that has a really big root system before? You know, I spent 9 years in Trinity in North Alabama, and for many of those years we lived in a house that had about 2 acres of land. About 1.5 acres of that was in the backyard, and 99% of that was completely covered with these giant oak trees. We had, I think, 10 to 12 giant, and I mean like you can't wrap your arms around the trunk, giant oak trees. They were huge, they were tall, they were massive, big spreads on them. The problem was that they had such a giant root system that they dug into everything. Like we couldn't keep a nice little patio. We tried to make this little brick walkway in the backyard, and the roots would end up crawling up into it and knocking them over. It got into the septic tank at one point. These roots were getting everywhere. And I love the trees because of the shade. I mean, it was so nice. In the summertime, it was so cool. In spring, fall, it was so cool back there. And we put out the swing set, and it was always shady. You didn't have to worry about, Bailey would get out in the backyard. We didn't have to worry about her getting sunburned or anything like that. She could just play. But for 2 times a year, I absolutely hated those trees. One was fall, obviously, because when you have 10 to 12 giant oak trees in your backyard, what you end up with is about a 3 to 4 inch deep pile of leaves throughout your entire backyard. And that's what my backyard looked like in the fall. I hated it. I tried everything imaginable to take care of those leaves during the fall. One year I cut them up with a lawnmower. That didn't work so well. You know what you get when you cut up leaves with a lawnmower? Smaller leaves, right? I mean, you just get smaller leaves. That's what you get. So another year I decided I was going to rake them all. 5 days later, I'm still raking, and I hate those leaves, and all I've got are big piles of leaves now. So I asked my neighbor if I could borrow his little, yard sweeper. It clogged the thing up. You couldn't hardly use that. One year I had this ingenious idea. I got this leaf blower, but it's also the kind that vacuums up and sucks them up, chops them up, and puts them in a little bag. I realized very quickly, you know how long it took me to chop up a bag? Because the bag was, I thought the bag was pretty big. It took me about 10 seconds to fill that bag full of leaves. And then I'd have to go empty the bag. Suck for about 10 seconds, empty, empty. And it took forever just for one pile. I finally thought, you know what I need to do? I need to figure out a system to hook up and this was one of those little MacGyver instances, I figured if I could hook up a hose to the back of the leaf blower vacuum thingy and run it to the back of my pickup truck, maybe I could fill it up that way. I never did do it. We just moved. It was easier. No. It was one of those things where I would just give up on them. I was like, you know what? I'll deal with them in the spring. I hated fall. But even worse was summer. Because in the summer, I had nothing to mow. Now, for some of you, you may think that's not a bad thing. For me, I would mow the front yard. I'd have to mow the front yard every week. The backyard was dirt. I didn't have a green grass anywhere. I had moss. I had a few weeds and dirt. I couldn't grow anything in the backyard. Springtime, I'd have nice, lovely grass for about a month and a half. And then as it got drier, as it got hotter, those oak trees would just suck up everything in that yard and would suck the life out of the yard. I mean, quite literally, it was like a desert in my backyard except for these giant oak trees. And you would mow the grass and all you get was dirt just flying up everywhere. It's horrible. One of the things I learned from that, though, is this. That why does Scripture call bitterness like a root system of a bitter tree or a bitter root system? The reason is because it's a lot like those oak trees. Those oak trees in the summertime will suck the life out of everything around them. And that's what bitterness does. Bitterness digs its roots into every part of your life. It digs up into your emotions. It digs up into your health. It digs up into your relationships. It digs away into every part that it can. And then when it gets there, it begins to suck the life right out of you. And next thing you know, bitterness has taken over. You ever met one of those people that you just don't even want to be around because they're so bitter all the time? Everything's negative, everything's bad. They don't like this, they don't like that, they can't stand this. If you walk into a store, they've had a bad experience at that store. You can't go to this restaurant because they've had a bad experience at that restaurant. And don't think about sitting next to that person at church because they don't like that person. I'm not going to that family event because that person didn't even... And you meet these people and you're like, how do you get that way? Well, guess what? Bitterness has dealt into their life and has become that bitter root system that has sucked the life out of them. Look at how Scripture calls it. It says it grows up to cause trouble. Cause trouble for you and for the people around you. Because the next thing it says, and defiles many. That's one of those things. Bitterness is typically one of those emotions that we keep inside of us. It's a hidden emotion. Yet Scripture says that it defiles the people around us. It defiles many. You may think that it's only going to affect you, but it doesn't. Because your attitude, your emotions, your feelings affects your spouse. It affects your children. It affects your family. It affects the relationships you have with the people around you. If you're bitter about something at work, you know how it comes out? Negative thinking, negative talking. I work with some very bitter people. They've been passed over for promotions. They've been passed over for various things. And there are times where I feel like all I'm doing all day is battling bitterness. Not in myself, but the bitterness of the people around me. Well, so-and-so, well, they don't ever do anything right. Well, she doesn't ever do her job. Well, he never does this. They never talk to us. They never tell it. And it's constant. Never. This. It's always bad stuff back and forth. And it's bitterness because they had some bad experience take place with this person or with that person or with the whole job experience. And it displays this bitterness and it's defiling the people around us. Matter of fact, one of the best things that a place can do a lot of times is expel that person out, right? Sometimes there are those people you just want to go, please get out of my life because your bitterness is affecting me. It defiles many. It comes around and it affects us all. When you think about what bitterness is, it's one of those things that just digs and eats at us. So how do we defeat this? How do we keep this bitterness from overflowing into our life and overflowing into other people's life? Because to me, bitterness, I think we can peg it. You know it when you see it. You know it when you feel it. So how do we stop it? Because a lot of times, even though we recognize we're that way, we don't want to deal with it. Well, it doesn't really affect anybody. It does. But I'm just not going to deal with it. I'd rather not. Well, Scripture says we need to deal with these things. We need to take care of it. And it gives us a very strong clue on how to do that. Matter of fact, there are two things that we need to do as individuals and as families and as people to deal with this emotion called bitterness. How do we take care of it? How do we expel it? How do we defeat the monster? Because ultimately that's what we're trying to do. We're trying to defeat these monsters in our life. How do we defeat this monster of bitterness? Well, we can go back to verse 14, and verse 14 plainly tells us this. It says, make every effort to live in peace with everyone. So the first thing we have to understand is this. If we're going to defeat bitterness, that bitter root that is digging up inside of us and is defiling us and defiling the people around us and destroying relationships and destroying us and eating us from the inside, if we're going to do it, we've got to make peace with everyone. Live at peace. It even goes beyond just making peace. We're talking about living at peace with everyone. Well, you don't know what they did. No, but God does, and God still said to live at peace with everyone. Isn't that pretty hard? Yeah, it is. Here's some keys to it, though. Because when I look at that and I say, make every effort to live at peace with everyone, well, I'm a pretty easygoing guy. I can live at peace with anybody. I may not like you, but I can live at peace with you. Because I'm not going to confront you. I'm not going to yell at you. I'm not going to scream at you, but I'm not going to trust you. I'm not going to deal with you. I'm not going to fool with you. I'm going to just kind of keep my distance, and if we talk, we talk, and if we see each other, we see each other. But you know what? That's it. I can live at peace with somebody. Well, that's not exactly what this means, because there's two types of peace that we have here. There's peacekeepers and peacemakers. Okay? Peacekeepers are the people that they can keep the peace, but they don't deal with the issue. They keep the peace because what they do is they just don't confront anything. They just let it kind of sit back in the back, and they ignore it and they avoid it, and they'll do whatever it takes to make sure that nothing festers up, nothing blows up, but at the same time that bitterness is still there. They keep the peace by not confronting the issue. They keep the peace by not dealing with it. I kind of look at it this way. I kind of picture a whole political scene, right? United States of America, we have a relationship with North Korea, don't we? Would we call it a peaceful relationship? Well, sure, we're not at war. Are we not? We're not at war with North Korea, so therefore it must be peace. No, it's not peace at all, is it? There's this tension there. There's this underlying thing that's going on there. There's this bitterness there between these two countries. You see, we are keeping the peace with North Korea, but we haven't made peace with North Korea. On the other hand, we've made peace with England. I mean, you think about it, if there's any country out there that we should just really not like, it's the English, right? After all, they're the ones that invaded us. No one else has ever invaded us. They've invaded us. They hurt us. They burned our capital. I mean, we could make a long list of all the things that the English have done to us over the years. Yet we've made peace with them. Matter of fact, they're our biggest allies. So as a country, we have kept the peace with North Korea, but we've made peace with England. If there's any country we should not forgive, it's probably them, but we did. And that's the way it is with us as people. A lot of times we keep the peace because we just kind of let it. We just kind of let it go. We don't deal with it. We don't confront it. We don't want to do anything. That's a peacekeeper. What we want to be is peacemakers. Check out this verse in Matthew 5:9. Matthew 5:9. This is how Jesus described it when he was given the Beatitudes. Blessed are the peacemakers. Notice not peacekeepers, peacemakers. For they will be called the children of God. You see, a peacemaker makes peace. In other words, this person doesn't avoid the situation. This person confronts the situation, but he makes peace. He doesn't confront the situation to make war. He doesn't confront the situation to make it worse. They confront the situation, they confront the people to make it better. In other words, if you've got harboring bitterness right now with a family member, maybe you've got a brother or sister that you harbor bitterness with, a peacekeeper would be someone that when you come at family events, you say, hey, how's it going? You shake hands, you hug at Christmas, but that's it. You're not making peace, you're just keeping peace. You're not fighting. While the peacemaker may come and say, you know what? There is a time where you did this, and I want to make peace with you on this. I want to confront the issue, I want to confront the situation, but not to make it worse, to make it better, to make peace. Now, how do we make peace in those situations? Well, it comes with a very simple word. To make peace with people, you have to forgive people. To make peace with people, you have to forgive people. Because you can't have peace without forgiveness. You can have the lack of fighting without forgiveness, but you can't have peace. Peace and forgiveness are tied hand in hand. This is what the scripture tells us in Colossians 3:13. You ready for this one? I don't like this one. I'll just go ahead and tell you, I don't like it. I wish we didn't have to read it. I wish God didn't write it down. I wish Paul had never thought of it. Whatever the situation is, this is one of those that I don't like. You ready? Colossians 3:13 says, bear with each other and forgive one another. If any of you has a grievance against someone, forgive as the Lord forgave you. I don't like that. How many of us like that? We don't like that, do we? Well, let's just be honest. We don't like that. That's one of the scriptures that we just like to just kind of go, yeah, God, okay. Yeah, but no, seriously. This is what God is saying. If you want to be a peacemaker, if you want to get rid of bitterness, if you want to live the life that God has called you to live, you want to be a child of God, as it said in Matthew 5:9, then you have to make peace, and to make peace, you have to forgive as God forgave you. Let that sink in for a second. Because you know that situation over here where the family member did this and did that? Not only do you go up to and you confront, you forgive as God forgave you. You know, Peter one time, they had this whole big question. Well, how much should I forgive somebody? Should I forgive them 7 times? Because that's what the law of Israel said, If somebody wrongs you, you give them 7 chances, and on the 8th chance, you punch them. Which, hey, that was a good step up because in the original scripture, when you got to Old Testament law was eye for an eye, tooth for a tooth, right? They hurt you, you hurt them. It's plain and simple. So, they had kind of progressed. They progressed. Hey, look, we're giving them 7 chances before we knock them in the nose. We're doing good. Hey, see how much we've grown? And yet when Peter said, how many times should we forgive somebody when they do us wrong? Jesus said, 70 times 7. 7, we look at that, we go, oh, okay, yeah. Well, in all actuality, when you study the scripture, that was a general term that meant infinity. Forgive them as many times as it takes. I don't like that. Because I don't want to forgive somebody. There are times where I just don't want to forgive them. I don't like you, I don't want to deal with you, and I don't want to forgive you. Yet if I'm going to make peace, and I'm going to get rid of this monster of bitterness, and I'm going to be a child of God, like it says in Matthew 5:9, I want to be called a child of God. I have to make peace, and I have to forgive. And I have to forgive as many times as it takes. You can hit me as many times as it takes, and I forgive. You can wrong me as many times as it takes, and I forgive. You can talk bad about me as much as you want, and I forgive. Now, does that mean I'm a pushover? Did I just let you run over me? No. But at the same time, I forgive. I forgive. I forgive. The key to peace is forgiveness. Yeah, but you don't know what they did. They did this to me. They did this to me. They defiled me. They wronged me. They hurt me. For me, myself, look, you can talk about me all you want to. That doesn't really faze me a whole lot. You talk about my kids. You hurt my kid. That's a different story. I can complain. I completely understand those people who say, you know what? But when they started doing this to my kid, I just really saw it. I can understand that because I'm very protective of my children. You know, Bailey will come home and talk about what's some situation that happened at school, and so-and-so said this, you know, and she's crying. What's the first thing you want to do? I want to go to the school and punch the kid in the nose. I don't care if he is in second grade. Bam! You know, bring it, little second grade boy. I'll take you. You know, or girl. You know, there's instances where it's a girl. Let's do it. You know, you and me, let's rumble. Yeah, I have to forgive. And in my forgiveness, I have to teach my children to make peace and to forgive. It's very easy for me to teach them to, well, if they do that to you, punch them in the nose. They won't do it again. Instead, what I have to teach is to be a child of God. We forgive. We make peace. And in making peace, we no longer have bitterness. Isn't that amazing? Imagine what our life would be like if we begin to let peace be the main emotion as opposed to bitterness. With our parents, with our children, with our brothers, sisters, with our neighbors, with our relatives, with our coworkers, with former coworkers who we haven't even seen in 20 years, we're still bitter about, ex-girlfriends or boyfriends or whatever the situation may be. Imagine what we would be like. Okay, let's forget about the relationships around us. Imagine what you would be like if you got rid of this monster called bitterness. What kind of life would you have? Because guess what? Bitterness first affects you. And in affecting you, it affects your family and the people around you. So let's deal with you. Imagine what you would be like if you just forgave. No matter what the circumstance, no matter what the issue, no matter what the problem, no matter how badly that business wronged you or how badly that person did things to you or whatever happened here, you just said, you know what? I forgive because God forgave me. And as much as God forgave me, because I don't know about you, but God forgave me for a lot. He did. Now, I'm not going to make a list today, but I can make a pretty good list of all the times and all the things and all the situations that I have done wrong and that God forgave me for on the cross. And that's what we need to do for other people around us, is to forgive, to make peace and forgive. You know, one of the things that our scripture originally said back in Hebrews 12, it said, make every effort to live in peace with everyone and to be holy. What's our ultimate goal in life? What's our ultimate goal in life? What is God working us towards? God is not working us to be a better person. God is not working us to be a nicer person. God is not working to make us into a less angry person or less envious person. God is working to make us holy. That is what He wants us to be. That should be our goal in life. Our goal shouldn't be to be richer, be more laid back, to be this, to be that. We could put a ton of goals in life. That is not our goal. Our goal is to be holy. And one of the things we need to do to be holy, be a child of God, to imitate God, and get rid of these monsters in our life. I'm going to ask you if you want to do this for me as we get ready to finish today. And yeah, we're running a little short today. That's okay. We're going to get done a little early on a holiday weekend. I want you to kind of take a couple minutes, and I want you to spend a few minutes just thinking about, we've talked about anger. We've talked about envy, we've talked about pride, now we've talked about bitterness. What of those things are you dealing with right now in your life? And as you spend a few minutes, I'm just going to ask you to spend some moments with you and God and let God churn up into your spirit what you are dealing with the most. And maybe what you need to do to help get rid of this monster in your life. We have the time today to just kind of relax and let God speak to us. So I'm going to encourage you to do that and let God speak to you about what you need to do to take care of these and to work yourself towards being more holy like Him. Let's do that now.